So, should you read The Wheel of Time? Yes. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam and today I want to talk about The Wheel of Time. So when I started watching YouTube, this was kind of all the rage at the time. Lots of channels were talking about The Wheel of Time. And I kind of don't see much of it around these days. So I want to kind of discuss whether it's still worth reading and worth talking about. So full disclosure, this is my favorite series of all time. I'll link my top 10 series, so spoiler alert, but it is my favorite series of all time. But a lot of people have a lot of complaints about the series. So they are reasonable complaints, and I just want to talk about the good and the bad of this series and whether you should still pick it up today. So with much further ado, let's talk about Wheel of Time. If you hear any screaming children or kind of work being done, the nursery by me are having like a family updo of the nursery. Why today? Kids don't need nice things, do they? Anyway, what is The Wheel of Time? So The Wheel of Time is a 14-book series plus prequel, and it is an epic fantasy series. So a big, long, chunky series made up of nice, big, fat books. And it is written by Robert Jordan primarily. The first 11 books were written by him, but unfortunately he died before he could finish it after contracting cancer. Thankfully, Brandon Sanderson, you may have heard of him, came to the rescue and finished the book wonderfully. Now, this series is generally considered like a bridge series. So it connects the old classic fantasy tropes and traditions, but takes them in a new direction. So the first book, The Eye of the World, is very much a Tolkien-esque book. It's kind of slightly derivative of the Tolkien style, which was kind of generally what people did in those days anyway to get published. So you can't blame the guy, but he knew what he was doing. He did that and then took it his own direction and started doing new things. So yes, this is very much a connection series between old classic fantasy and newer modern style. How can I possibly sum up the plot of 14 books? I cannot, I'm not going to try, so I'll give you the basics of what it's about. So in the world of the Wheel of Time, this is a cyclical world, hence the name Wheel of Time. Nobody knows how long the cycle is. They guesstimate between 3,000 and 4,000 years, but what's happened before will happen again, and people are reborn into the wheel. And there is a key character within this legend, this myth, and he's called the dragon, who is the strongest user of the power. And every cycle there are prophecies that come about from the myths, and the biggest prophecy is that the dragon will be reborn again. And another prophecy is that at some point the dragon will be reborn it's really hard to say, and stop this cycle and get rid of the influence of the Dark One. So what ensues is the typical classic story of the farm boy and the hero's journey, going from just a guy in a tiny town who knows nothing about the world, but eventually finding out that he is the chosen one who is destined to save the world. And of course, a lot happens because you have 14 books worth of story. Now, these books are generally Sandersonian in style. Brandon Sanderson has explained that The Wheel of Time is one of his favorite series and highly influential. And you can tell because most of the books are kind of basically self-contained stories. You have a lot of build-up and a lot of lore building and getting to know the world, and things do add on top of each other, but there will be a humongous coming together at the end of each book. So this is basically where the Sanderlanche was born. Through the course of the 14 books, of course, there are lots of power plays, and that is where a lot of the story revolves around. It's this Dragon Reborn coming to power, learning his power, and him taking control of the world so he's ready for the last battle. And this is key because it is prophesied that when the Dragon Reborn is revealed, there will be the last ever battle. Will it be the one that will stop the wheel turning? We don't know, but we must prepare for it. So the Dragon Reborn is gathering his armies, and the Dark One is gathering his armies, and all of the stuff in between. And yes, like I said, I cannot possibly sum it all up, but it is epic and so much happens. So yes, my bias has been coming into play. Obviously, I love this story. There are some amazing storylines in this. However, you may have heard of the Slog, and the Slog is real. So people vary in how long they think the Slog is. Some people say it's 6 books. Some people, the lovers of the series, will say it's 2 books. Haters of the series will say it's 14. But the Slog is real, and it will vary depending on you, basically. And this is a section of the story where things are moving a lot slower. There's a lot less plot happening, a lot of sitting around, a lot of building up, basically. It's almost like we've rebuilt the chessboard and we're slowly just putting the pawns out and building up to what is going to be the climax. And a lot of people tap out at this section, and to be honest, it's fair. It's a real criticism. So if you are scared of the Slog and potentially 4, 5, 6 books dragging you down, then it is something to consider. If you're a fan of battle scenes, this story has got you covered. There are many famous, humongous battle scenes and a lot of one-to-ones. You have the whole range. You have sword fights, and you have armies, and you have colossal magic. But this is all eclipsed by the last battle, of course, and it lasts basically 2/3 of the final book. So if you love battles, then that is something that is going to grip you 100%. If you're not a big fan of battles, then obviously that might daunt you, but after a 13 1/3 book build up, you really want to witness this battle, and it is huge in scale. It has the Dragon Reborn fighting with the Dark One and all of the armies of each side in separate areas doing lots of different stuff. It's really amazing. When we come to characters in the Wheel of Time, this is generally considered a positive. There are a lot of wonderful characters in the Wheel of Time, and the journeys that they go on, if you consider 14 books worth of journey, there are huge peaks and huge troughs. It's a real roller coaster. And especially the 5 people that come from the little town that you follow throughout the 14 books, they are just completely different people by the end of the series. So character development is really strong in this series. One thing that definitely puts a lot of people off is that there are a lot of named characters. Over 1,000, I can't remember the number. So if this is a real deterrent to you, then I understand. It's not for everybody to have so many characters, and it does get confusing at times, especially between the magic users, the female magic users, which are called Aes Sedai, because they can seem quite samey. It's part of the lore that they are this way, so I understand it, but a lot of people don't get along with this. They have this stiff upper lip and flatness of character, and they're hard to distinguish between. But, you know, a lot of them do change. As this world is changing, they change their attitudes and they become different people. So even that, I would say, is still fine. But yes, if you're scared of thousands of characters, then this might not be for you. So the Dragon Reborn, the prophesized hero who is going to save the world. We've all heard of this trope before, and it does begin kind of typically. However, he is not your typical chosen one. He goes through a completely different journey to a normal hero's journey. And this is where things kind of move away from those classic tropes a little. He is a really... He struggles. He's a struggling hero. He's full of fear, and he's scared that he's going to hurt people. He doesn't want this responsibility. He hardly ever wants to take this on himself. but he pushes through, and it's just an epic journey. And talk about roller coasters, his is the most epic. Let's come into some big negatives to do with character, and one for me, even me who loves it, are relationships in this story. We have a love square, I guess you'd have to call it, because there's 4 people, and it does kind of seem a little bit gratuitous to me at times, a little bit wish fulfillment-y. It's kind of gross. I didn't really like it that much, so that is a big turn off for people, and I understand. There are also a couple of other relationships within this series that just seem a little bit, yeah, and you know, I totally agree. So if that's something that puts you off, fair enough, I'm not going to argue with that. But also, there are some beautiful relationships. There's one in particular where it kind of starts out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? But soon you just realize that these two are an amazing couple. So you have best of both worlds with relationships. Big downside to characters number 2 is the Forsaken. So these are basically the Dark One's lieutenants, and they are very famously known to be a bit wimpy, a bit pathetic, a bit stupid. They make bad decisions. A lot of them are just very easily brushed aside, and they're supposed to be these super strong baddies from another age. So I totally agree that some of them are a little pathetic and a little stupid. And I think partially their ease of being beat is because there are so many of them. I think he just kind of oversaturated how many of these lieutenants there are. So it would be, even within 14 books, too difficult to make them really hard to beat, because it's too much. So I think that's the biggest problem. However, I think that quite a few of them are genuinely quite frightening and powerful, and have really interesting motivations for why they are choosing the dark side when they could have chosen the light, you know? So it is genuinely interesting. A lot of these bad characters are interesting and are frightening, but it's maybe 10% of them. So I do understand this big criticism. Now, lovers of world building, you cannot complain. This is one thing I will put my foot down on, is that the world building in The Wheel of Time is some of the best I've ever seen. Probably only really rivaled by Tolkien. Jordan really fleshed out his world, the history of it. Everything is so detailed. You just know that he spent a lot of time making this world, and it feels so real. Interestingly, the land doesn't have a name. The fans give it a name, but I'm not going to tell you that because it's kind of spoily for who the Dragon Reborn is. But yes, this land doesn't have a name, and it's kind of boringly shaped. It's just like a fat square or a rectangle, a little bit like the US. But like the US, it is very, very large and very varying in its landscapes. And this all really affects the cultures. And the cultures in this book are so rich and defined. You know, they're very distinctive between each other. And you can tell that Robert Jordan really put a lot of work into making the distinctions between the cultures. He's highly descriptive of not just their appearance, but their history and their customs. And it all depends on everything that, you know, that they are used to and they've grown up with. They all have different ways of speaking, and there are people that come from different parts of the land, from islands, who are outsiders, foreigners, and the people from over this large mountain pass who just have a completely different way of seeing the world. And all of these cultures clash, and it's just truly fascinating. I also find the magic in this world to be highly interesting. So on the scale of hard to soft magic, as coined by Brandon Sanderson, I would put it basically in the middle. So it has hardness about it, it has rules, it has things you can and you cannot do. However, it is not overly described in a Sandersonian way like Mistborn. And that is the sweet spot for me. It has mystery and it has rules. So there are things that limit the users, but they're not overly explained, and there's still some mystery about it, which is awesome, it's fun. It's an elemental magic that is based, it has 5 types of what they call weaves, and they're all kind of like air and earth, and I can't actually remember what they all are, but they are elemental. And it's a power that is split in 2, that is gendered. And obviously some people might have issues with that being gendered. But I kind of look at it as like at the time that's slightly more normal, and it does make it interesting in the ways that the 2 powers can do certain things better than others, and they can't use each other's side of the power. In this world, magic exists, but it's not as powerful as it used to be, or the people using it aren't as powerful, and knowledge is lost to time. And through the story you get a lot of revealing of knowledge of the past times, and kind of relearning what people used to do. So it's really fascinating to see this world open up and brighten up with the magic. And there are also some epic applications. There are lots of magical artifacts, so Angreal and Sangreal, which amplify your power to certain varying levels. And you have Ter Angreal, which are very specifically designed artifacts that can allow you to do some really awesome things. And the scope of it is just amazing. There is also a dream world in which it's a reflection of reality, but it can affect the real world. And people are kind of more adept at that than others, and it just makes really interesting dynamics. Robert Jordan's writing style is another area of potential contention, as a lot of people say that he is overly descriptive, takes a long time to describe the minutest details of buttons or whatever, or a plate of food. So if that's something you don't like, it might put you off from the writing. However, if you're a fantasy fan and have read any classical stuff, this isn't going to be new to you. You know this writing. It's very normal. It's common. So that is not a deterrent for me. It's kind of normal. And I find a lot of his descriptions to be actually genuinely beautiful, quite poetic, not overly purple, so accessible, but with real moments of beauty. And another area that people complain about is his repetitiousness. So there are a lot of like catchphrases that characters all have, or certain actions that they do. Obviously the braid tugging is one of those things. Again, in my top 10 video I talked about that, link in the description. And yes, he does get extremely repetitious, and it can get, I keep thinking of the Icelandic word, irritating. So that can put a lot of people off, and understandably. And there are also sometimes some really cheesy dialogue. He liked a bit of cheese in his dialogue. So again, if that's going to put you off, maybe think about that. But overall, like I said, I think his prose is generally accessible and good, with some moments of beauty. I'm going to breeze through some of the thematic work because it's just extremely deep. If you're looking for thematic work, this series has it in spades. Things that are very focused on are obviously it being the wheel of time and long spans of time, are memory and history, and how what we know kind of gets changed throughout history through the retelling of stories through oral forms, and how this can change your perspective on what has happened. And depending on who is telling the story, history changes. So the truth cannot ever really be fully known. Another huge theme is to do with fate and destiny, and responsibility with power, and whether you have free will with such responsibility and power. It's about acceptance of change and not always being able to control what is happening. Once you're thrust into power, you cannot always take control, and it's about deciding where to take control and what is the best thing to do and the right thing to do in the circumstances. At the beginning of this series, the magic was only used by females in the world, called Aes Sedai. So this book series really explores the role of gender in society and how females versus males may lead differently. Friendship and love are really vital themes throughout this story. As they go through the bad times and the good, it's really important to know who is your friend and who you can trust, and even through the bad and the good times, that you stick together. There's a lot of focus on putting aside differences and personal interests for a common good. So all of these varying societies have their own view, their own outlook on how the world should develop through this troubling time, these world-changing times. And they have to put these aside and all of their traditions to work together to fight a common cause. Jordan also incorporates a lot of influences from different cultures within our society, the real world societies, from a lot of different Eastern philosophies and a lot of different European philosophies, and duality is one of the biggest ones in the series. So let's answer the question, is it still worth reading The Wheel of Time? I'm still going to say yes, but I could understand if it was a no, having heard what a lot of the downsides to the series are. I would say I would not necessarily recommend it for absolute beginners. This was like the third series I read, so I was quite a beginner, but I was kind of fully in after reading A Song of Ice and Fire. So it is possible, so that's kind of up to you, but maybe not absolute beginners, maybe not teenagers. If you're a completionist or like really enjoy the history of the fantasy genre, this is absolutely essential reading because it really is a bridge series. It combines the classic with the modern, and that is an interesting thing to witness. At least give it a go, and if it's not your vibe, then that's fair. Modern readers, people who have only really read a lot of books written in the last 10 years, that kind of stuff, this might not be for you because it does have some of those old trappings, you know, the writing style, the pace, that kind of stuff. So maybe super modern readers might not enjoy this series. But in general, I think this book series, it has a lot of flaws. I accept them, I acknowledge them, but everything does have flaws. So I think it's absolutely worth giving a try for most people and just taking, you know, acknowledging that it does have flaws. I would say please give it 3 books. I know this is a classic thing of like read 10 books and then it gets good, but okay, at least the second book, because the end of that book is absolutely amazing, and if it doesn't grip you by then maybe it won't ever. But is it worth giving a try? Absolutely. Is it worth finishing? You decide. Okay, that's the end of the video. Hopefully it wasn't really long and boring. Thank you for watching. If you've come this far, please like and subscribe and comment and all that stuff. Let me know how wrong I am and how awful this series is. I know there are a lot of people who think that. Let me know how awesome it is. I want to hear that too. And for now, just have a lovely old day, and I'll see you in another video soon. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Mwah.